All right, and without further ado, Teresa, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, Connie and Anthony, thank you so much for having me. My name is Teresa Friedman. I am the Assistant Director of Technical Support Services at Westchester University in Pennsylvania. I've been at the university for about 13 years now, and my teams manage all of our virtualized software as well as all of our endpoint management on campus.
Well, thank you, Teresa, for taking the time to share everything you've learned on this project with other universities. And, perhaps to kick things off, if you don't mind, if you could introduce us to Westchester University.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So Westchester University is part of the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. That is 10 universities in a state-owned public system. I know for those of you outside of Pennsylvania, you're probably familiar with Penn State. Penn State is actually outside of the PASHE system. They have their own system of universities across campuses across the state. So these are 10 universities. Tuition is the same at all 10 universities across the state, and it is frozen and has been frozen since 2018. So it is an excellent value. There are 82,000 students across the system, and when we're looking at those students, 32% of those students are low-income Pell Grant recipients, and 30% of students in the system are first gen. So Westchester is the largest of those 10 PASHE universities, and we are the fourth largest university in the Philadelphia area. Our enrollment is just about 17,000 graduate and undergraduate students. And in talking a little bit about Westchester and equity, we kind of looked at the population of our students and found that because of the 35% low-income students, we found that 9% of our students experienced homelessness outside of their dorm at Westchester, or 33% are housing insecure, 30 are food insecure, and 47 are basic needs insecure. So we really started to look at how Westchester could accommodate and could provide high quality education for all of the students in the Commonwealth.
Very, very cool. I'm sure that causes a lot of challenges. Maybe if you don't mind layering, how I was reading recently that Penn State, there was a recommendation to cut 1/3 of their campuses. And
Yes.
perhaps if you could layer your campus or your campus system, as well.
Sure. So yeah, Pennsylvania, like the rest of the country, is dealing with the enrollment cliff that is happening to students across the country. Outside of your top 20 universities in the country, a lot of universities and university systems are dealing with dwindling or challenging enrollment numbers. So we are really looking at making sure that we can support the students who do enroll, and making sure that all of the students have an equal access to success. So one of the things that Westchester, in their commitment to all students, including some of the low-income or marginalized students, is our Moonshot to Equity program. And the Moonshot to Equity program is a collaboration across southeastern Pennsylvania where institutions are committing to reducing and eliminating equity gaps, institutional equity gaps by the year 2030. So using evidence-based practice. So a lot of that is happening on the academic side. But as the university looked at that and really prioritized that, we in IT said, what are the equity issues that we see, and what can we do to help reduce those equity gaps or close those equity gaps? And really the equity gap that we saw was in equitable access to technology. So this is a quick Pew study that we looked at. It is a study of households in 2021. And what was really interesting here and what we were seeing anecdotally on our campus and what we went to see when we looked at our students individually was students were coming to campus without the right technology that they needed to be successful. One of the things that stood out to me here is, 41% of low-income households don't have a laptop or a desktop. 43% don't have access to broadband internet at home. So these are really tools that we knew students needed to be successful. And,
I
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Anthony.
That's okay, Teresa. So that's really, really cool. And you mentioned that this was not just Westchester University, that this was kind of a system-wide initiative. Did I hear you correctly?
That's right. It's I'm sorry, it's a collaborative project, a partnership across southeastern Pennsylvania. I know one of the partners that we work closely with is Delaware County Community College, which is a local community college in the area, and there's some other institutions as well. So really looking at the way that we could close equity gaps in education.
Very cool.
So one of the things that I've found in my career, I've been in technology for 25 years, but I've been in higher ed for about 13. And when I came into higher education in 2012, the technology landscape was very different. Students used technology, but there was really there was still a lot of analog instruction going on. One of the biggest things that we saw being used, our computer labs being used for, was printing out syllabus, printing out materials, because we saw faculty starting to use our LMS and starting to move to this digital transformation. But students really still wanted paper. Those students had been born in the mid-90s. They didn't grow up with a tablet. They didn't grow up with an iPhone. So they still wanted a piece of paper, right? And over the past 13 years, we really saw that shift to these students who are now coming in. Students who are coming in this fall will have been born in 2007, 2008. Or I'm sorry, 2006, 2007. They grew up with that tablet. They grew up with the iPad. They went through COVID. They went through digital learning. They are 100% committed to having these digital modes of instruction. So when we came out of COVID, and this is a quote from the EDUCAUSE Horizon report from 2024, we really placed that question. Students wanted to come back into the classroom, right? They wanted to be in person, but was it the right plan to kind of go back to those non-digital methods of delivery? And, EDUCAUSE really says here, what we came to ourselves is that, no, we really can't, because limiting the use of digital technology doesn't help the student. It puts them at a disadvantage as they continue their education and enter the workforce. So really improving that digital literacy and learning how to build that into their work was important for their success moving outside of the university.
That's a really good point. Another statistic that I've seen with EDUCAUSE is that students love brick and mortar campuses, right? Because they're social, they can go there, they can make friends, etc. But what they also love is the flexibility that if they wake up one day and, don't feel like whatever, walking to class, or in your case, with your demographic, if they have families or if they have children, if on that day it's not convenient to go to the class, if they can do it remotely, that's a huge win for those students. Is that what you're saying out there on campus?
Absolutely. The word that you used was flexibility, and I think that's absolutely what students want. Not only for classes themselves, but for the work that they need to do outside of classes. So where in the past we might have been able to say, hey, we have all these computer labs on campus, you can come in, you can get your work done. Students don't always have that ability, right? If students have a part-time job that takes them off campus, or like you said, they have family responsibilities where they can't be physically on campus, they need access to the tools that they need from whenever, from wherever they are and whenever they have the time to use them.
Excellent.
So
Thank you.
one of the things that we saw was one of the inequities in access to technology was access to access to hardware and access to software. Those were the two things that we thought that we could make a difference in impacting for students with that technology gap. We did find many of our students were coming onto campus with their own laptop, and that was great, but some of them weren't. Some of them, a non-zero number and enough of a number that we needed to address it, were coming to campus and trying to get by with just their smartphone. So looking at D2Ls or LMS, looking at their LMS, trying to look at their coursework, trying to work on assignments on their phone only. And I don't know if you've ever tried to type a paper on your phone. I personally don't want to even type out a whole email on my phone. It wasn't working for them. So we wanted to make sure that students had access to the hardware they needed. And also then next to that was the software they needed. Like I mentioned earlier, we had all these software titles available in our computer labs, but students weren't always able to come into our computer labs. There were buildings that were locked at certain times. There were classes that happened in some of those labs, and that was the only time they can get to them. There were barriers that were keeping them from accessing the software that they needed. And a lot of these titles were either expensive titles, they weren't ones that they can download on their own. What we saw more often, especially with some of the scientific software or some of the physics software, some of the graphic intensive software, was they were coming to campus, maybe their laptop was 3, 4, 6, 7 years old, and maybe it didn't get the latest update. So really they were struggling to get the software that they needed on that hardware. So we at that time, we had some lending programs on campus. They were short-term lending. We had a couple hundred laptops in the library. They were available for students to borrow for a day or two as needed. And what we saw was a lot of the same students were coming back and borrowing those laptops over and over and over again. So they would borrow it for 2 days and then bring it back and then come back in a day and borrow it again. So we really needed to make sure that we got laptops into the hands of those students. And we were able to do that. So because of the university's commitment to closing these equity gaps, we were able to say, hey, we need this program where students who don't have a laptop and do not have the ability to access a laptop, where we can give them one that they can use for the entire academic year without having to bring it back and check it in and check it out. What we wanted to make sure was that we were able to manage these devices so that they were able to run the software that the students needed and access what they needed, and that the students had very little barriers to getting access to the hardware. And we did. We started a very successful laptop lending program where students, we have a couple hundred students who are able to come in, get a laptop and use that laptop for the entire academic year, and then they can renew it for the following academic year as well. We own those laptops, we manage those laptops, we don't gift it to them as they own it now. We keep kind of some control over that hardware, but the students don't have that problem of having to check it in, check it out, and we didn't have the problem of having to manage those check-ins and check-outs as well. So the next question that we had was, well, where are we going to find the funding to make sure that we can have these devices for all of the students who need it? And we did look at some of those computer labs that were not really being used anymore. But what we also found was we have these laptop carts that were all over campus. Every department or some departments had multiple carts of laptops that they really wanted to have in their departments for students to use because of certain software that they wanted their students to have access to. And we were maintaining at the time over 1,100 laptops in these laptop carts. So when we looked past COVID, we got back to, we came back out of COVID, we were getting students back on campus, we were trying to get laptops in the hands of students who needed them. We took a look at the use of these laptop carts across campus, and this is 2 years out of COVID, so we are well back on campus at this point. And what we found was the use of those laptops in those carts, this was from September of 2023 to May of 2024, was well under 20%. These laptops in these carts were not getting used. And really, those were resources that we wanted to reallocate and get them in the hands of students who needed them, rather than sitting in these carts and not being used at all. So when we went to faculty and we said, hey, you have these carts and they're in your department and students don't really use them, they said, oh no, but we can't let go of them because we need to be able to access that software. We need them to have SPSS, or we need them to have SAS. We need them to have SolidWorks. And we're just afraid that the students aren't going to have the laptops that they need to run that software. And that is where our solution came in, that was RAM Cloud. So this goes to the software piece, right? We were trying to get hardware into the hands of students who needed it. We were working on that. And to do that, we had to make sure that faculty were really happy with the way that students who had laptops in their hands could access the software that they needed. So in 2012, we had implemented a virtual software environment, and we called it RAM Cloud. Everything on Westchester's mascot is the Golden Rams. Everything on campus is RAM based. We have RAM Print, RAM Net. Our new SIS is called RAM Portal. So our virtual software environment is RAM Cloud. And RAM Cloud was implemented in 2012. It was Citrix based, and it was, I will say, a beast. It was hardware intensive, it was resource intensive, it was manpower intensive, and it worked. We were able to provide virtual access to software for students, but faculty hated it. They really hated it. And we actually found that it was getting harder and harder to convince faculty that they should tell their students to use it. And they just found it very clunky. So one of the this was the old RAM Cloud, right? It was client-based. It was, we had a Citrix receiver that had to get put on every single computer. That's great if you're managing all of the devices in your environment. If it's a BYOD environment, that is a lot harder. We didn't have the right version. The students didn't have the right OS, and getting the right client installed was not easy. We used Zen app in our Citrix environment. So it wasn't a full desktop. It was just the app. So students really had trouble accessing their files, right? So faculty wanted to give them an SPSS file or a data set to work on, and students really had trouble figuring out how to access those files. So here we are again, we're saying to faculty, hey, we're going to take these laptop carts out of your classroom. And they're saying, no, we need access to the software. And we said, well, you can use RAM Cloud. And they said, no, RAM Cloud doesn't work for us. You have to fix it. So that is what brought us to the project that we implemented 2 or 3 years ago when we started working with the Porto to upgrade RAM Cloud to what we call RAM Cloud Next Gen. And one of the things, or the 3 things that we went out shopping for, was we needed a system that was not client-based. It had to be a full desktop, and it had to be really easy for students to access their files. And that is what we got. So we went through a transition to a Porto, and we got something that was browser-based. We got a full desktop and easy access to cloud storage. So once we got those things together, we were really excited about what we had to offer to faculty, because faculty, we felt that this could really meet the needs of the students where they were. Going back to our access to technology and our hardware issue, another thing that we were seeing a lot of post-COVID was students, a lot of K-12 schools had gone on a one-to-one initiative during COVID. And when they did that, a lot of them went to iPads and Chromebooks. So we did see some students who were coming in, maybe they couldn't afford a brand new laptop or a new iPad, but they still had their Chromebook from high school, or they still had their iPad from high school. So having a browser-based environment was really important because it allowed those students to get access to what they needed as well. That would not have been possible in our old RAM Cloud environment. It was just too challenging to get that to work. So 3 more things that came up when we were looking at Porto as our new RAM Cloud solution that faculty were really excited about. 1, our LMS integration. we kept hearing from faculty in our old RamCloud environment that they couldn't make students understand how to get to the software they needed in their classes. So they would tell students, hey, go do this assignment in SPSS. And students, there were instruction videos, there were paperwork on how to get to it. And they spent more time troubleshooting students getting to the software than the students learning what they needed to learn in the software. So with Oporto, we showed them that we could easily just integrate the link directly to the desktop into their D2L course. And it just came right from the assignment within D2L. Hey, click here, open the desktop, and they had access to the software. The other thing was the analytics and reporting. Faculty then had access to look at which students were actually accessing the software that they needed in their classes. So it gave them kind of a view into it. I know a lot of faculty had told us that students were saying, hey, I just don't know how to do it. I just don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And then when we dug into it, they hadn't even been in the software. So they weren't really getting in and getting the work done. And then the third thing was the virtual classroom option. And this is where students, a lot of faculty moved to virtual office hours post-COVID. Students prefer that sometimes, again, going back to they may not be on campus during office hours, but they want a chance to be able to connect to their faculty. Well, here, if they had an assignment that they were having trouble with that was in the software that they needed, SAS, SPSS, we have many other titles out there, they can bring up the RamCloud environment, the Oporto environment, and their faculty could actually get right into their virtual classroom, get in there and help them out with the assignment remotely.
Yeah, if I could add 2 points, Teresa. So based on our customer feedback, we're taking the LMS integration a step further. Right now, they can log in from the LMS to the virtual desktop, and that makes it very easy. But what we're adding this summer release is the ability for the student from within the virtual desktop to download any files from D2L or from the LMS that they need for their assignment, or even the assignment instructions, which makes it, again, removes one more barrier. What they're also able to do is once they're done with their assignment, they can hit one click and submit the assignment file back to D2L. So again, removing barriers there. The other thing we've done in this previous release is if a student is stuck, let's say, on something in the virtual desktop, and the faculty is not online, which happens a lot of the time, they can send a link to their virtual desktop that expires in a week or in a day. And then the faculty can log into their virtual desktop, see what's going on, give them some instructions, or perhaps help them out and move along. And in environments like yours where the demographics are challenging, this asynchronous collaboration, our customers tell us is very, very important.
Absolutely. Anything that we can do that makes it easier for the student to get in touch with their faculty, get the help that they need on their time is better for the student. It helps promote student success, which is really what we're committed to. I personally, I know, Anthony, I was on a conference call, one of your town hall meetings when you talked about that D2L integration where we can hit submit on those assignments. And our faculty are so excited about that. So we're really looking forward to that. It's just the next step in making it easier for students to use these tools. So we went back to faculty and we showed them this tool, and this is just a view of our environment, and they were kind of like, I'm not sure. I hated the old RamCloud. What convinced me? So we really had to go out and do a campaign, right? We had to get back into faculty and say, hey, whatever you thought about the old environment, this is totally different. This is not at all what you had seen in the past. This is something that will be really useful to you and your students. We listened to your feedback. We looked at what was wrong with the old environment. We think that we have a tool that's going to correct those issues. And we really emphasized faculty training and demos. And I have this this graphic here because this is a graphic into our LMS, this is my test course in our D2L environment. And this is what so many people, so many faculty came back and said, oh, this is the game changer. I can put a link to the software right in my course and students can click on it. That is exactly what I need. And it was really easy for us to set up as well. So that was really helpful. So we did all this communication. We really emphasized faculty training. That summer before we went live, we held all sorts of training courses for our faculty, especially the ones who we had worked with in the past, especially the ones who we knew were using a lot of software in their coursework. And we did a lot of demos. We let them get in there and use the tools, and we got some feedback. And this was the results from our proof of concept. I love this one because this is one faculty in nutrition, and she's like, this is so much easier. This is so much easier. And it was much smoother. Oops, sorry. Well, the
hit the up arrow if you wanna go
oh,
back.
I apologize. Thank you.
No worries.
So the students themselves, I had some students who even worked in our department, and we had them go in, and they were heavy SAS users, and we had them use SAS. They had SAS installed on their own computers. They were really techie, and we said, just go ahead and use it in Porto and let us know what you think. And they gave us some feedback, and they were like, this is great. One of the things they loved was that we were able to use the cloud mounter to access their OneDrive. We're a Microsoft school, we use OneDrive. We have all of our faculty and staff have access to that. So we're able to put that out there and let students connect to their OneDrive right from within their desktop. And the students really liked that because they liked having that access to their files immediately.
Yeah. A common feedback we get from faculty is that if you don't provide the students this kind of pre-packaged environment that's ready to go, faculty becomes technical support. Is that something that you've seen before? If the student has to download or install or connect or do any of that, is that a common complaint you've heard at your university?
Well, it was a common complaint from faculty, and I will say, as the one who did a lot of that support, it was a common complaint for me because faculty would come to me. When we were using our old environment, I actually had standing courses with some of the faculty who use that software the most, where one day in the beginning of each semester, I would come in and teach them how to use the software. So I was becoming part of the instruction, and faculty didn't want that. That was wasting a class period for them to be able to really teach content. I had a faculty who told me that he used to spend the first 2 weeks of a semester just getting students to the point where they could get SAS running. And then now the expectation is that they're up and running and using it before the first class meeting. So yes, faculty did not want to troubleshoot those issues. As IS&T, we're trying to step in and supplement some of that support to keep it from faculty, and it was wasting class time. So eliminating that need for additional support just to get to the tools that they need was really helpful.
Fantastic.
So this was the feedback that we got the summer before we launched. After the fall of when we launched, we looked at our use, and this is it's a little tough to read, but the yellow line was the use of our old system in the fall of 22. And then fall of 23 is when we went live with the Porto. And you can see that the use just skyrocketed. So throughout this semester, this is always our, fall break, Thanksgiving in here. This is our, finals week over here. But you can see week to week, the use was just a lot higher. And this was from faculty really adopting the tool and saying, okay, this is going to make my life easier. This is going to be easier for my students to use. So that was the piece that really sold it to faculty. And then we were able to see that in the data at the end of the semester.
It's interesting to note how in the beginning, the usage by for RAM Cloud One and RAM Cloud Nation kind of are similar,
Hmm.
but over time it increases very, very significantly. So I think we had to overcome the skeptics.
Yes. 100%. Yes. And then once we did, faculty talked to each other. So once we did, we got a couple faculty on our side. There was a lot of interest in it. And we saw it crossing departments too.
Excellent. That chart, should put a smile on your face. It certainly does on my face, quite candidly. Thank
It
you.
really does. Because again, I I um I had a faculty member in statistics who was a heavy SAS user, and he came to me, this was a few years back, and he said, I must just drive you nuts. Like I'm always having all these issues and I need my students to use SAS. And I said, look, you and I have the same goal, and that is to get the students access to what they need. So you're not, bothering me. I want to be able to provide for you an easy tool so that the students can get what they need. And so for me, it was really exciting to be able to go back to him and say, I really think that this is going to meet your needs. This is what's going to help those students be successful. Now we're on the same side. And it's really funny. I'm just looking at this. We launched in fall of 2023. I have not chatted with that faculty member in a good long time. And I think it's because he hasn't had to call me to complain about anything recently. So this is a reminder I should reach out to him just to say hi because it didn't always have to be about complaints. He's rolling, and I can see, I as an administrator can go in and I can see what classes are using RamCloud. So I can see his students are using it. He just doesn't need as much support from me. So
Excellent.
yeah,
I want to call out this item because a lot of customers, particularly new customers, tell us, how do we get the adoption? How do we get usage to the point where we want? And I think you mentioned one item, but perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more on it.
sure.
What we've learned is that faculty adoption drives student adoption. Um, because,
Yes.
if I'm a student and the faculty says, hey, you have this tool, it's always there for you, you can use it, the student will use it. If the faculty doesn't mention it, it's much, much harder. Is that your experience as well?
That is absolutely my experience. The most use that we see from students is in those courses where faculty have adopted this and faculty direct students to it. The nutrition faculty that I was talking about before, in nutrition, our nutrition department uses a database where they go out and they meet with clients, patients, and they have to build these menus, and they use this database where they build the menus and it gives them, their sodium intake and things like that for nutrition students. And it was really clunky, and it was clunky in the computer labs, and it was clunky when they tried to put it on their own computers. And getting the faculty on board with using any tool we tried to help them with, they were like, look, we just want to help our students build these menus. Once we showed them this, they were like, this is what we needed. This was great. And all of a sudden, boom, adoption and nutrition shot up where maybe one faculty was using it on our old environment, that database in the old environment, and the rest were kind of clunking through with other options. Now all the nutrition faculty use Aporto to direct their students to this database. So faculty adoption is the key for student use. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
So that really is the story of how we got to where we are with making software available virtually to our students. It was really a part of making sure that students had the right tools that they needed. And for us, part of that was, yes, making sure they had access to laptops, but also that the laptops that they had or the tools that they had, their Chromebook from high school or their iPad, could get them access to the tools that they needed. So one of the things that I love about Aporto is that it puts all of the students on the same footing. So that student, we have some of them, we're in Chester County in Pennsylvania. It's a wealthy suburb of Philadelphia. So yeah, we have a lot of students who come in and they have brand new MacBooks every year, or they have high-powered gaming laptops. And now those students who have their 4-year-old Chromebook from high school are really on the same footing because they can still get the same access to the software that they need. And it's all in that browser. So it really, I feel, makes the same tools available to all the students across the university.
That's a very laudable goal, Teresa, and this has been a great project. One question I'm wondering if you could touch upon. You talked to us about usage or perhaps lack of usage of your, computers, that students can borrow. What
Mhm.
about your physical computer labs? What was usage before, and did this project have any impact on your physical computer labs?
So what we found going into COVID, we had maybe 5 or 6 what we'll call open computer labs on campus, just for students, any students to use, pretty open during the day. Um, and if I think back to when I started, the beginning of the semester, there would be lines out the door to use these computer labs. Going into COVID, that use was starting to slow down. When we came back to campus, we were off campus for, almost a year, a year and a half for COVID. When we came back to COVID or to campus, we didn't even reopen 2 of those computer labs because we saw that use dying. And in the ones that we left open, we kind of kept an eye on their use. It just dwindled and dwindled and dwindled to the point where we ended up pulling devices out of some of those labs just because they weren't getting used. So we do still have a lab. We have some open labs in the library. We have one in our student union, but those are smaller than they used to be years ago. And we just don't find that same use that we did before. So I think this project was more of a response to that dwindling usage of those computer labs and a reallocation of resources to where they could be better used.
Makes a lot of sense. So some of the questions we are getting um, are for people who are on this call, who are listening and thinking of, going on a project like this one, what would be the roadblocks that you would give those folks the heads up, watch out for this or watch out for that? What were some of the things that, the lessons that you've learned from a project like this one?
One thing that I would recommend is to really reach out and listen to your faculty. Find out what they need, find out what they want, find out what students are telling them they need, and work with them. Really partner with them to make sure that you're addressing their needs. One of the reasons why I think this was really successful was because we had been going back to faculty and hearing what they had to say. About how our other system, our older system, was not meeting their needs. So I think it's really important to listen to faculty. The other thing I would say is timing, I think, is really important. We made sure that this was up and running and ready to go um, at the beginning of the summer of the year that we implemented it. That gave us all summer to reach out and train faculty, to test out issues that we might have come up with, to really figure out how we wanted to document and train faculty with it. And then we launched live in the fall. And I think having that month or two over the summer to be prepared to go live in the fall was really helpful.
Preparation is key. So one question I see here is, what kind of applications or software you've been able to deliver to Aporto, and what software have you not been able to deliver, if any?
Sure. So we have every title that we have that we have licensing available to in Oporto. The ones that get used the most by far, SPSS, SAS, um, MATLAB, Mathematica. Um, we actually have one that is homegrown. It was a faculty who built his own app for a language course that he teaches. We were able to put that in Oporto. That was great because Again, it was a homegrown app, so making sure students can access that in an easy way was helpful. We have some coding software. RStudio is big across disciplines for statistical analysis. So we have RStudio in our environment. And then we do have a GPU environment that has ArcGIS for our geography and planning students, and SolidWorks for our physics and biomedical engineering students. So having the ability for students to have a Chromebook, but do 3D rendering in SolidWorks on that GPU virtual desktop is really powerful.
Very, very cool. You mentioned earlier some faculty had like a database and database environment. Were they able to move it to RAM Cloud next gen?
Yeah, they were. So we did have to change it a little bit. We changed the way that it worked. We worked with the Oporto team and were able to kind of modify it in the way that they needed. So it was available as a local database that students were able to access. So yeah, they were able to install that and get that working. Um,
Fantastic.
that's actually
That
one of our most successful apps and one of our most successful department conversions, and that was that nutrition department. Yeah.
fantastic. Fantastic. Um, so a question that has been asked, but I see it that it's coming up again. Um, what were what were the key tactics you've used to get buy-in and adoption from the faculty?
Yeah.
I think, everybody recognizes that's a major hurdle. We're in this business and we have 300 universities as customer, and we recognize that's a major hurdle. What were like kind of the key tactics?
So we took a couple of approaches. The first was, making training available as often as we could, make it really accessible to faculty. But I think what really ended up working was the personal one-on-one reaching out. I did a lot of personal outreach to faculty who I had worked with in the past. I know a lot of people on my team did some outreach. We also found some champions within some, strategic departments, notably our mathematics department, statistics, comp sci, nutrition. Political science uses SPSS a lot, so they were key in getting some champions on their side. So I would say one of the things that is really helpful in the communication is to reach out personally to some faculty that you have a working relationship with. Make sure that you can tell them why it will work for them, why it will be better for them than what they had used in the past, and really ask them to champion it for you to help other students.
That is great. One thing I may want to add, some, IT folks struggle getting faculty to attend, a training session. And I think the approach you mentioned, which is reaching out to the people you know who could become champion, is a great one. What we've also had some success with is a lunch and learn. Everybody has to eat. And
Yes.
we as a company, are happy to sponsor with our customers a lunch and learn where we will deliver, a brown bag. And to some faculty, has some appeal, and they'll show up and they'll listen, and eventually they become champions.
Yeah, and Anthony, I should mention also the Oporto team helped us with those faculty sessions. And I think sometimes hearing it from someone outside of our internal IT department and getting, that outside view and that outside information from someone outside of the university was helpful as well. It also helped us. It helped us to make sure that training was better training for the faculty.
Excellent. So we have a question from Nigel here, and he asks, how has the difference between the old and the new environment impacted the infrastructure's ability to deliver content, specifically wired and wireless networking? I guess,
That's a
it's really, did you understand the question?
Well, I'll take a stab.
Okay.
Um, we're lucky on campus that we have a really robust network infrastructure. I think there was a study that came out from EDUCAUSE, and then we replicated that on our own campus years ago that said any given person on a college campus probably has an average of 2 to 3 wireless devices on them at all times, right? So they have their laptop, they have their phone, they might have, an iPad or a tablet. So we're very fortunate that our administration supports us in making sure that we have a really robust wireless network in our campus and that we have dense Wi-Fi in all of our academic buildings. So we have found on campus that we really don't have an issue. Where we do sometimes find students have issues is when we find that they're working remotely, and maybe they only have a wireless hotspot or something like that. Aporto actually has tools built in where you can see right in the desktop what the user's network latency is. So that really helps us to troubleshoot when students call and say, hey, I'm having this trouble. We can kind of see if it's their network that's really causing the problems. And then we can help them out to find a better way, to get a better network connection or whatever that looks like. But we've been really fortunate. I have not really found that to be a problem. Even in the few circumstances that we've had it, even some of those GPU heavy applications, we really haven't found them to be network intensive because, again, it's all browser based.
Yeah, we do a lot of compression, to deliver, to use very little bandwidth. But to add another layer to the great answer you provided, I think having, a strong network infrastructure, obviously on campus, is very important. I believe that's an important prerequisite for a project like this. The other thing that I want to mention is we do realize that we have students who one day, they're working from their kitchen and everything is fine. And the next day the weather is nice, they go outside and now the Wi-Fi signal is not as strong.
Yeah.
So we're developing an AI assistant we call Portia that we're going to introduce also this summer, where the student can say, for instance, why is Aporto slow today? And it'll run an analysis and say, your network latency today is 4 times what the network latency was, yesterday or in the last 3 sessions. Maybe you're further away from your router. So it has a lot of data and intelligence built in to help the student troubleshoot themselves, because we realize, one of the biggest challenges in those environments is for students who are working remotely and trying to get some support at the same time.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay, I think we have one um, other question. What any other improvements? I mean, you've mentioned that you've had an increase in utilization. Any other improvements that you can point out to that we could, that the people who are on this call can put in their proposals or their reports?
Yeah, one of the most powerful things that I had, this was a specific faculty in criminal justice. He came back to me and he said, I've really been able to almost add a week of content to my syllabus. Because what I used to do, he is someone who teaches in a computer lab. So he has students go in the computer lab. And he said, I used to have students come in and I would give them this SPS project and I would give them three, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday block schedule to work on the project in class. And now, because it's so much easier for students to do that work remotely, I've kind of done a flipped classroom on that and been able to give them that assignment and say, okay, you can go work on that assignment at home. And that gives him more class time to provide content to his students. So That's really what we're hoping to be able to provide to faculty, the tools that they need to make, I think you mentioned it before, to make it less about IT support and more about them being able to provide content for their students so that students can learn. So that I thought was really powerful.
Great story. Great story. Mike, if you're listening, this should be on our website tomorrow. Excellent story. Well, I think we've covered all the topics. I want to extend my thanks to the audience, particularly to the person, gentleman, or lady who dialed in from the UK. I can see the 44 country code number. Teresa, you've been very gracious, both with your time and with a fantastic delivery. So I want to extend my thanks to you. You guys have been such great partners, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us. So
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
I was happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, everyone.